Welcome everybody to day 2 of LA Games Conference. We have a fantastic show for you today. First, let me just thank everybody for a wonderful day yesterday. The speakers were fantastic. The audience was engaged. It felt a little bit like being at a hotel event again. There was so much chatter in the chat, and we do want to continue that today. So please introduce yourselves in the chat. When you do that, make sure to change the drop down from all panelists to all panelists and attendees so that everybody gets to see your intros. And we look forward to having a vibrant discussion going on today. If you do have questions for the panel, please put them in the Q&A area, which is just to the left of the chat, so that our speakers can see all your questions. Today is all about Hollywood and creators, and our agenda is just packed with great content. We're going to kick off the morning with a panel on building the metaverse, one blank at a time. We then have a keynote conversation with Krista Wolf at Jam City. We're then going to cover the topic of the rise of NFTs. Gaming brings blockchain mainstream. We'll then talk about creating blockbusters and the role of games and interactivity in developing entertainment franchises. And we will end the day with a fireside chat with Warner Music Group and Wave. So, boy, it is a lot of great content today. We will also try to keep everything running on time as we did yesterday. So sessions will start at the top of the hour and they end at 45 past so that you have time, 15 minutes between each session. Okay, folks, so without further ado, let me introduce our kickoff panelists. Sam Englebardt, Managing Partner of Galaxy Interactive. Welcome, Sam. Great to have you here.
How are you? Great to be back with you guys.
Yep. Marchand, CEO and co-founder of Overwolf. Uri, great to have you here.
Thank you, Ned. Great to be here.
Yep. Bjorn Book-Larsson, VP of Product and Avatars at Roblox. Bjorn, welcome. Saxs Persson, Co-Chief Creative Officer for Mojang Studios Minecraft. Welcome, Saxs.
Thank you.
And our moderator, none other than Andy Swanson, Head of Publisher and Developer Relations at Mod.io. Andy, hey, I love that. Have a great panel, guys.
Ned, where are you, bro? Ned, I'm in the metaverse, ready for the panel. Ned, oh man, metaverse thing. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna have to go old school on these people. Hi, everybody. Welcome from the metaverse to the metaverse, metaverse. Awesome to have you. Hi, gentlemen. How are you? Feeling good today? Ready to take on this topic that's bigger than religion and politics and everything in the world? You ready?
Let's go.
Always.
Here we go. All right. So I thought I'd start off with the fact that we really have a hard time defining the metaverse. So I'm going to go with what the internet says is a metaverse, and I've tasked these other 4 gentlemen with coming up with their own definition of the metaverse. We have not shared this with anybody on the panel before, so this is the first time this is all being shared. The Wikipedia says the metaverse is a collective virtual shared space created by the convergence of virtually enhanced physical reality and physically persistent virtual space. That's like easy to both sides of the same coin. Including the sum of all virtual worlds, augmented reality, and the internet. So it's all physical experiences, digitally enhanced, all digitally enhanced physical experiences, and includes all virtual space, virtual worlds, augmented reality, and the entire internet. Saxs, what do you think the metaverse is?
You're going hard and heavy. I'm going to follow up the Wikipedia definition. It's a fascinating question. I'll say from my perspective, on what I want it to be. So this is hugely aspirational. Right, so for me, the metaverse is persistent and live. It is your non-sharded reality. It has history, has consequence. It's less anarchy, more governed. It's more inclusive, less preferential. It's a digital co-op equivalent, allowing participation, entrepreneurial, and opportunistic. It is not owned. It is to be defined. It is not to be walled. It is where we can get this whole society, government, and community right for the first time.
I love it. I love it. All right. Okay. Let's go down to, because
I like homework.
No comments. So no comments yet. Let's go, Sam.
Well, actually, Andy, it's funny. I mean, I think first of all, Saxs, that was beautifully stated.
It's awesome.
I want it written somewhere so I can take a little closer look at it.
I'm
this is
editing
fun
Wikipedia
that
as
this
we
actually
speak.
is. What's that? You're gonna put it on Wikipedia for us under your name? This is fun though, because I actually love that we haven't heard anybody's answer. I mean, Andy, you picked both the Wikipedia definition, but also the one, and I'm sure you know that came from Neal Stephenson and is sort of the most recent or one of the most recent and probably the most quoted like literary definition of the metaverse as we've seen it evolve through the novels and some of the recent movies and so on. And obviously that idea goes all the way back to even the pre-technical days and to the idea of being brains in bats and all the other stuff. I've seen, and I guess in the interest of trying to accomplish this challenge of creating at least one shared definition for the metaverse amongst everybody so that we actually have something to talk about and can figure out where we do agree and disagree. I've gone to trying to break down the Neal Stephenson definition with my buddy Matt Ball, who I think's done a really good job recently of like hammering away at everybody around, the 6 or 7 things that are necessary conditions of the metaverse, at least, so that we can start there and address them. And those, Saxs actually hit on a few of them, but just to kind of keep it easy for everybody, I'll just go down them in order. I mean, I think we're talking about necessary conditions of the metaverse. We're talking about persistence. We're talking about aliveness or the idea of a living world. We're talking about concurrency, concurrent presence, and we can get into like what that means and how many concurrents and so on, but some idea of concurrency. We've got to have a functioning economy in there. People need to be able to live and work and make money and so on. Physical and digital continuity, another thing I think Saxs hit on there, but I'm just going to define it simply like that. Interoperability of identity, data, virtual goods, right? I think that's an important one. And then the last piece of this that I can't remember whether Matt actually put in or I added, but the idea that it's ultimately going to have to be UGC driven. It's going to have to, like what we're talking about is so big that the bottom up content creation is critical here, just from a practical production standpoint, if nothing else. So those 7 things for me are a way to frame this conversation and try to address like which of them and where are we on the evolution of each of those things and what technology is necessary and what business models are necessary and so on.
Super cool. If we could fix all 7 of those things in 45 minutes, I'm a freaking genius. Yuri, over to you, buddy. What do you got?
All right, I really tried to keep it short, so I'm a little embarrassed. But I can do the long version after the short version.
Do the short version. Do what you are. I would just.
So I have 4 words basically. So it's a technological and psychological interconnectivity experience.
I love it.
This is the short version, right? Obviously technological, obviously psychological, partly because of the challenges, but also because of the values. And then it's the interconnectivity, right? In telcos, you have a big amount of companies that are able to provide a sustainable, high quality level service, despite the fact that they all have different business models and different motivations and different interests, which is similar to the metaverse that we're talking about. And then it's an experience. So this is kind of how I try to break it into 4 words.
Cool. Hey, look, sometimes the simplistic is easier. I love all the different takes everybody's taken. And there's one last, and I've got my man, Bjorn, what do you got for me?
All right, so I'm going to be the downer. I'm going to go super pragmatic. I'm going to go
reverse hype.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go super pragmatic. Let's call it that, right? We had an earlier chat where we talked about mini-verses, where the idea is that Roblox today, Minecraft today are mini-verses. So for me, the metaverse, and I'll explain it, it's actually really simple. The metaverse will occur when it can bring along a meaningful virtual identity to all these separate mini-verses. And the reason why I stop there is because in my view today, and this is again, super pragmatic, right? Many companies are solving elements of all the things that Sam said and Uri and Saxs, right, are being solved already, right, but in pieces. And so functioning economy, UGC creation, a creator ecosystem, peer-to-peer selling, all those different pieces kind of exist in the world, right? But the thing that doesn't exist is the bridge between these separate sandboxes or these separate experiences. That there is some of these overlay stuff, obviously, Uri, at Overwolf, or you have Discord, you have all these like sort of loose connectivity tissue that sort of sits outside these sandboxes, but the sandboxes aren't truly connected or bridged. So I think fundamentally, just looking at how technology evolution happens, usually incrementally, I feel like we have arrived at a point where we have an enormous amount of the components, and what we don't have right now is a overarching ecosystem that connects the pieces. So it feels, again, the pragmatic approach is, I don't disagree, by the way, with Sam's beautiful 7 list or Saxs' new Wikipedia definition. They'll be up in 15 minutes. But I just think that pragmatically, look, we have a bunch of it. Now we need to connect the pieces.
Hey, look, we've all been on these panels a bunch. I know we're all experienced people, and we know that oftentimes these are driven around trends, but oftentimes they can be driven around hype trends. And we've seen hype trends fail in gaming or take a lot longer because the initial excitement doesn't equal the reality of the business playing out. I'm just going to pull a couple of those because I've lived through them, and I think a lot of these guys, a lot of us gentlemen have in the space. Cloud gaming, right? On Live was a long time ago. I was at Ubisoft at the time. That's 3 jobs ago. The promise of cloud gaming was going to change the future. We now have 4 out of the 5 FANG companies playing with cloud computing in gaming, and we still don't have a business model and an accurate, like, it working. Not to say, again, conceptually that cloud gaming will not have its day, because I do believe it will. It's just these things take time. Things like in-game advertising. Esports took longer than everybody thought. I was out on the panel circuit talking about esports being $1 billion business 6 years ago, and we still haven't quite crossed that. There was a time when esports and VR were crisscrossing, and I was like, those Venn diagrams are not meant to cross yet. We need more time. So I think your approach, Bjorn, and I appreciate it, is what can we do in the interim to try to reach that long goal? How can we establish definitions of what we've done thus far with the idea of continuing this journey? So I'm going to give Bjorn the credit of the term miniverse, because I'm going to use it because I love miniverses, because I think there are miniverses in this concept all around what we do. I think Disney Plus is kind of a miniverse in its own way, because they're saying all of this content is here. So that's a little bit of that. Why don't we talk a little bit, Saxs, Minecraft is a really exciting space that's been around for a long time, and a brand and an IP that people recognize. Can you talk a little bit about the journey of Minecraft and its place as a mini-verse, and how do you see it potentially, if ever, becoming a metaverse?
Yeah, it sure has changed a lot, right? Like, we are almost 12 years in now, and I would say like progressing from a game to a platform to a, like, Bjorn's miniverse was never planned. Like, we're sort of living the reality of what it means to invite large communities to participate. I think that's a big part of it. Like, the screenshot behind me is from a server that sort of grew up from nothing and ends up with these large concurrent sub communities that they 100% like feel obligated to like to foster and nurture and feed with content and all these things. Like that's like the role of Minecraft, like as it is today, is more platform than game. The future for Minecraft is fascinating, because what have we've been on a journey to connect everybody. Like, it's all good and fine, everybo's playing sort of on the disparate endpoints, but really we want everybody to get the feeling of being together. Like it, and the next step is what we're discussing here, and what I laid out is like, what is the thing that binds all these different experiences together, and is an opportunity to offer a way, like a slim bridge between Roblox and Minecraft, or really, like, are we talking about these miniverses in and of themselves haven't developed fully enough that you really can talk about like how to interoperate with any other community. Right. Like, we can't have, I came for the game and I left with like an ad. Like, that doesn't really work for anybody. So how do we get that value exchange right while we're merging these communities, or not merging, but like allowing these communities to to sort of at least like see each other.
Yeah, some of the best things that have happened in gaming happened by accident, like unintentional. Like you pointed out, like Minecraft got to this place without a very specific roadmap. I mean, obviously it's evolved and gone. Interestingly enough, in this space, Minecraft is both, I consider it sort of a platform or miniverse as well as an IP. It has its own iconic iconography. You know, you have characters, there are things that are identical. So you have an interesting space. Roblox is more of a platform with trying, and the creators are creating IP on the platform. So it's a little bit of a different take, but similar. Bjorn, you want to talk a little bit about that and how you've approached it from more of the platform and giving the keys to creators with new IP, where the Minecraft is playing within Minecraft IP. So this is kind of a different take there. That is also important. IP is going to be a part of the metaverse or the miniverses.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, to be really clear, I actually think Roblox is, let's call it an internal metaverse. Like to itself, once you're inside it, it behaves like a metaverse. We have some 8 million people that have made experiences in the system, and we have, you know, we just had our earnings release yesterday, so now we can talk about it. We have 200 million people a month who play, and over 40 million people a day who play, right? So it's a incredibly vibrant, large community that basically gets a sandbox of a bunch of tools, including Roblox Studio for free, to then to go and basically build whatever they want. It's interesting to watch what happens because people build in directions that we can't anticipate, which is really cool to see. And then what we have done recently, and this obviously since it's Hollywood, is we have started a concert. So we started with Ava Max, we've done Lil Nas X and a few others. And in the case of Lil Nas X, we had, I think, 33 million people who saw the concert, and at a peak concurrency of about 1 million users watching this thing at the same time. Now, in fairness, those things are sharded, so we don't actually have a stage and 30 million people standing in front of it. So there are sort of shortcomings, if you will, in the metaversification of this type of experience. However, from the individual participant point of view, maybe it doesn't matter that much that you're just in a room essentially with a few hundred people, right? Not millions. So there's some debate, and there's obviously some technical limitations to how you can do that. But it's been interesting to see. I mean, the uptick from brands and music industry and a bunch of others has been pretty incredible. And quite frankly, we haven't yet actually monetized these experiences. I mean, the experiences are monetized through the purchase of Robux, which then you pay to the creators. And it is sort of a self-sustaining ecosystem between the different creators and players. So we have elements of that metaverse-ness, but to Saxs' point, obviously I can't go to Minecraft from my Roblox virtual identity. There's no bridge between the two directly. And again, the bridges that do exist are these exterior scaffolding, like the Discords, the Overwolfs, those type of structures. So it is an interesting time to be in, but I think the components exist, and we are internally a metaverse, but we are not outside our own sandbox.
Got it. Interesting. Sam, you play a different place in the space with Galaxy Interactive. You want to talk a little bit about what you guys do and how you place your bets and deploy on making things move towards all the components that we've talked about in it? Because that's another thing. It's like, who's going to fill in the gap? Who's going to come up with all of these things and create we're all trying to figure out how to make these systems work. You take it from a slightly different approach. Sam, you're muted, Sam, I believe.
Sorry, yeah, I would love to I'd love to talk about that. I think for 1 second, and at the risk of being obnoxious here, which I hope isn't the case, but it would not be the first time.
Okay.
I just want to actually point out like the extent to which this is such a difficult topic, because I think we've actually, even though we started this conversation with like this explicit goal of defining the metaverse, and this is like, I'm going to do now, I guess, like what my old like logic teacher would have done to me 20 years ago, but I'm trying to understand and make sure I'm following this correctly, because I think in some ways, Andy, you started out with this definition that to me actually is the broad definition, the metaverse, in this way that I actually think most people who aren't in the industry in one way or another, but when they think about the metaverse, I actually think, and again, because of the commercial extension of this particular idea, I think what you talked about is largely what people really mean when they talk about the metaverse, and they should be pretty cynical about the timeline under which we're going to accomplish that goal and create anything like what you experienced in Ready Player One or Neal Stephenson's books and so on. So then, you know, and we kind of narrowed that down to, or I tried to narrow it down to these 7 necessary conditions. And then I saw with like Saxs and Bjorn, I think Saxs, it sounded to me like you might have been saying there may only be a couple of these necessary conditions, you know, and in fact there aren't 7. There may only be a couple, because you sort of said this shared emotion, this sort of emotional, physical experience, and I don't remember the exact definition, but it was like it left out 3 or 4 of the things that I feel are necessary conditions. And then I think Bjorn said, if I understood him correctly, I think in some ways Bjorn said, or you could interpret Bjorn's definition or where he believes we are today as saying, well, actually, 5 or 6 of these 7 conditions are being built or are already built, but there's this one necessary condition of interoperability and identity, you know, self-sovereign identity across these verticals that hasn't been solved. And so the metaverse means solving that, which to me means, I don't know if it means, but it might mean that these other 6 things are already satisfied, or it might mean that you don't think that they're conditions. And all I know is we then go off, and it's so fascinating because this is what happens. We then go off into our discussions about this industry and our own sort of like, I still don't know how are we defining this metaverse, because if we're like, what I'm trying to do, and this comes back to like the platform technologies, is I'm just trying to take each one of these things, and until I'm convinced that I'm either missing necessary conditions or in fact something I think is necessary isn't, I'm just trying to take each of these 7 things and assess like where are we in its development, and if we get them all right, which includes, you know, Bjorn's condition, like ultimately, because it's a necessary condition, we're not doing the metaverse without all of these things. Then we're going to have this idea of the Neal Stephenson world that I find so fascinating. But so like you could go down the idea of concurrence, or you could go down the idea of physical and digital continuity. You could go down the idea of identity and things. And so there are definitely people solving both at the infrastructure layer and also on the content layer. They're trying to solve each of these different items.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm taking the approach as an investor in trying to build this thing or participate in building it, which is going to be been a long and it'll be a long process. I'm just trying to take each of these things and invest in people that are where I find them at whichever like level in the particular stack they're at. And so some of them are building really way down infrastructure things that are going to be part of this, and some are building content or content universes that I think have a shot at aggregating enough users to create, you know, I sort of said UGC being an important piece of it, like enough users to create an incentive for people to spend time and energy and creativity and money and all the other things to make stuff in these worlds. And I don't know how you can take any of these things. I haven't been able to figure out how you can take any of these things individually, either away from this definition of the metaverse, or think that you're building it sufficiently if you're not at least aware of all the other stuff.
So
I'm glad you agree with me, Sam. This is great.
So I absolutely agree with you, Bjorn. I mean, I think so. Like, I absolutely agree with you. But again, I guess nature of necessary conditions versus sufficient. Like, I don't know if you agree with me. I clearly agree with you that interoperability is one of the necessary conditions. I don't know whether.
I think the Saxs earlier point that, will we ever get there? Like in some ways, I think the other 6 items, you could have them and they can live in their own miniverses. We may never arrive at Neal Stephenson. Like, it may never happen. On the other hand, it's a really neat idea. And I hope it happens just for selfish reasons. But I think going back to, there's one thing I just want to emphasize, is that one of the necessary things in all the people you invest in, Sam, to me, is the low level friction, or the lowest possible friction for creation. Like, so one of the things Roblox does is when you make something, you push a button and magically it appears on iOS, Android, Xbox, and PC instantly, right? Mm-hmm. And that's actually a piece of engineering that's incredibly hard to pull off, because we span the, let's call them physical box boundaries that we also are bound to, right? There's all these other dividers, and Roblox has at minimum solved a piece of that, right? So that, I think, is a necessary condition. Now, will I be able to go to Minecraft or something else? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have a North Star when you build anything. I think what I try to help with is setting a goal that sits outside of like reasonably like horizon one, because like it's kind of trite like to try to solve these small things. Like we are city states in and of ourselves. Roblox is a city state. Minecraft is a city state.
Correct.
And if our goal was to have entry criteria like getting into East Germany back in the 90s, then that's entirely possible but not desirable. And I think the only way that you make a lasting, worthwhile place called the metaverse is if you leverage it one step up on the Maslow pyramid, rather than just trying to connect at the very, very, very basic step. I think that's the real challenge, right? Because everybody's comfortable in their own city states. Like there's no like it's hard to define the opportunity that comes with why metaverse. I think you ask for a definition, you ask for all these things, but nobody's bothered to ask why does this really matter? And I think that's ultimately it.
Yeah, we may find out it doesn't. Like, to be honest, I mean, that's we find that like city states, people enjoy city states. Like that's partially why they're created. UGC is another thing. UGC is constantly being part of this conversation as well, and I'm not sure it needs to be or not. I don't know where. Yuri, I want to bring that over to you because you and I are both in the UGC space trying to figure out how do we extend other people's universes, right? We're not IP creators with Mod.io or with Overwolf. Obviously Overwolf's business has other areas as well. Mm-hmm. But people confuse UGC, I think, with Metaverse, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. How do we approach that from the content creators that don't have a miniverse, right? There is no miniverse, or do they consider them there? How do we do that, and how do we approach those angles?
Sure, but I want to maybe start with a provocative thought that maybe counters what Bjorn said just a little bit, because I agree fundamentally that taking an identity and switching between or migrating it between multiple miniverses makes a lot of sense, but I would argue it's possible today, right? If I'm a creator and the creator is the connecting layer, I could theoretically build a Minecraft mod with a consistent environment and a server that maintains basically an ability so that when I build my Roblox game, I kind of push it to Minecraft as well through building a mod, right? Theoretically, it could be done. Have my Roblox game. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be my identity inside that. But me as a creator, I just created my own sort of miniverse that sits on both these platforms, if that makes sense. So like where I'm going,
it doesn't work as an end user, right? So the challenge there is that it has huge friction for the end user, but it's great for the creator.
Absolutely, huge friction. But at the same time, technically, I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think it could be done. So like, and then my thought around UGC is that I think there's somewhat of an alignment around the panel is that the metaverse is, or UGC is an important element of the metaverse. And with all these metaverses that we're talking about, they're essentially open for creators. So maybe creators are this connecting layer. And I'm also trying to think about pragmatic steps. Obviously, big vision, small bites. If we ever want to see through, there needs to be like pragmatic steps that we're kind of taking towards. And I think maybe, Andy, maybe to your question, it could be around standardization of UGC, of creation across games, having a huge amount of creators that are creating across games as like a connecting layer across these miniverses. And maybe this is where salvation would come from, or like a good first step.
Got it. So content's really interesting when we come to this because I read Ready Player One a while ago, and then I read it prior to it being optioned by Spielberg and being made into a movie. And I read this book and I thought, oh my gosh, this is my childhood. It's pop culture. It's 80s. It's all these things. It's all these IPs that I love, crisscrossing, da-da-da. And I thought when I read this and being in the game industry and doing some licensing myself, I was like, there's no way they could ever make this into a movie, right? There's too many IP rights that they're never going to get the ability to do. And then I saw Spielberg signed on to it and I was like, you know what? They might be able to make a movie because of the clout that he has and the IP touches that he had. And then I went and I watched Ready Player One and I thought, this is really fun. But I looked and I realized there were a lot of IPs that were not represented in that movie and in that book because they didn't have the rights to them, because people didn't want to play ball and they didn't even want to play ball with Steven Spielberg to have their character next to Master Chief, next to the DeLorean from Back to the Future. How like content is important. How are we going to get content to play ball in an industry in gaming that notoriously has been both closed with content and also now with UGC starting to share with content? How do you guys on the platform side, Bjorn and Saxs, like how do you work with other IP and other content? Bjorn, you're now having I saw the Hasbro developing IP on Roblox. Minecraft is actually,
to be clear, Hasbro is going the other direction. They're taking Roblox characters and then putting it out in the real world. Going back to Sam's point about physical interconnectivity.
Oh, I was that not a two-way licensing or arrangement or no? It's just a one-way going the other way.
Let Saxs answer, and I'll come back to that one.
So we work with. I'm not going to say every major IP, but like more or less, like we have very good relations like across like a normal IP portfolio, and we've enjoyed like incredible success when we allow Minecraft and this IP to like really marinate. Like we did a Pac-Man collaboration on for the 40th anniversary of Pac-Man, something like that, of a reinterpretation of Pac-Man but in Minecraft, and it was incredibly like creatively successful, but also from a player perspective, something that I don't know, call it a modern player, like today's player, like expects IPs to play along. Like there's no expectation that the MCU can't touch Batman. Like why not? Like when I play with my Legos, they certainly do, right? And then I think that's the maturation that we've seen, at least in the IP portfolio, has been, while there's very strong IP rights, like from a UGC perspective, like there's more and more appetite for making these IPs interoperate. Like we are on, like we're obviously owned by Microsoft, but we are on the best of terms, like I would call it first party terms, with every single major platform, because we know players demand it. Like that's why crossplay might not seem like a big thing, but from an institutional perspective, like that was breaking down every wall that's ever existed for the last 20 years in video games, that my platform, my people. But the minute you broke that barrier, like all of a sudden, like the dam broke, and we see a huge appetite for cross collabs and remixes and like sort of all the things that you would hope for as a player to see these IPs. Like we just finished with a Nintendo on Smash Brothers, like something we worked on for 3-4 years, and the announce of Smash Brothers took down Twitter. Like when Minecraft plus Smash Brothers, like that is like mind blown for players. And I think we're still in that phase where we're trying to see like what is possible, like when we take IP and sort of smash it together. But that's the future. Like I've been in the space, in the user generated content space for the last, I don't know, almost 10 years, I guess. And it is incredibly powerful. Like once you figure out a way to harness that energy, like you just have to step aside basically and not get in the way anymore, which is very much my job today, is like step aside.
Get out of the way. It's a good job. It's a good job to have.
Minecraft Rise, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Bjorn, back to you. You had to circle back on the IP on platform conversation.
Yeah, no, so it's similar to Saxs. I mean, we have collaboration with Hasbro, and we have, without naming the brands, let's say that there's a lot of brands who have been aggressive at putting themselves into experiences. So, Gucci did a bunch of announcements with Genies, I think it was. Those types of brands are obviously talking to us. They're talking to all the different platforms to get, themselves out there. And obviously, music industry is a notoriously hard set of brands to work with, and obviously we work with those guys, and we're going to be announcing a bunch of more of those. I think there is a challenge, right, which is that once you, from a music industry point of view, for example, you now have to go make an experience in each one of these sandboxes. So to Ure's earlier point, like it's like, the Warner Music could go make something and have to make one version for Minecraft, one version for Roblox, one version for Fortnite, one version for whatever like the different systems are. And that turns out to be a challenge. Currently, they're willing to pay that effort because no one quite knows where the entire audience will be. But there's a lot of extra effort having to be done on the creator side in order to span these different boxes, if you will. And I think from a consumer point of view, it's equally problematic because you have if I'm going to find something, I didn't maybe know that there is a collaboration between Minecraft and a particular brand. I don't know like where to go find this thing. Like there isn't an easy way from a consumer point of view to go experience these things seamlessly. Like that simply doesn't exist. And again, may never be solved. But I think, it is interesting to see, to Sam's original point, which was, will there be crossover between physical and digital? And absolutely, right? Like some of our best-selling stuff is toys, right? Like it's kind of physical toys, like not the virtual version. And it's an interesting thing to watch Hasbro make games coming from creators who originally had made content inside Roblox, and now become Hasbro plastic figures. Like it's sort of this mind-bending confluence of those pieces. So I think it's an exciting time, but it is, everyone's trying to figure it out. That's kind of the short version.
Yep. I'm going to go two more before we get some Q&A. And then I want this to be short because this could go for the whole time. Monetization, right? We're all in a business. This is a business. We all need to make money. Some of us are for profit. Some of us are startups that are VC based. Sam's an investor. Like we want return on this. So understanding monetization in a UGC/metaverse is interesting because the mechanics of monetization on Roblox are different than the mechanics of monetization on Minecraft. Yuri, Overwolf has taken an advertising approach to monetization for a variety of different reasons, which is a perfectly legitimate approach to reaching people. Sam, you probably look at return when you're looking at it. How do we reconcile monetization? Are people going to be willing to come to the table and, rev share splits that used to be 2 between platform and creator are now, or IP owner, are going to be platform, IP owner, creator, and potentially third party like myself or like Mod.io or like Yuri with Overwolf or one of the investment companies that Sam's building. How do we work there? Are people going to be willing to give, or is that the one of Sam's list of the 7 that we're never going to cross because we're, what do we think there? Quick answer on that. Quick thoughts, because I think that's the big one.
Well, I think Bjorn and Saxs, already have that figured out with, their mini-verses or universes that they control. So I don't know, based on the conversation that we're having with IP holders that don't really have currently sort of the bandwidth to deal with the creator community and power that, there's certainly willingness and understanding of the value that they can generate for themselves, both from like an engagement standpoint, but also then from a monetization standpoint. There's a bit of a reluctancy with some of the IP owners for monetizing mods because traditionally that has always been a free industry. But I think it's gradually going towards a place where it is legitimate and there's like some sort of a 3-way split, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Sam, do you have anybody that you invest in to try to solve this problem? Like, is there a monetization play in the tech investment side of things? I mean, or is that something that the big guys just have to come to the table and figure out?
No, I mean, this is certainly happening. I mean, you're seeing this. What's a good example? Most relevant to that question that ties sort of technology and brand and creators. You're seeing like the NFT space has exploded in people's consciousness over the last several months, and probably the most well-known organized project has been this thing called NBA Top Shot, and like that's an example of a licensing deal with the league and the Players Association around a technology product and monetization through the sale of these digital assets that are the intellectual property of the leagues legally, but then they had to figure out, well, all right, how are we going to monetize this thing, and how are we going to split up this pie, and they ended up landing on an agreement, a certain percentage back to the IP holder on the initial or primary sale, and then an ongoing. This is one of the things that the technology and why NFT technology is so interesting. It enables a sort of indisputable and forever monetization of royalty streams effectively. And so they just, the negotiation was around what percentage of the initial sale is the IP owner going to get versus the platform, and then what percentage of the ongoing secondary sales will flow all the way down the line line to all the way back down to the original IP owner. And that is a technology-enabled new way to approach an old concept of royalties. But I think the technology in that case has enabled the entrepreneur building the platform to do better in the negotiation with the underlying IP owner. But we're going to see this question has and negotiation has repeated itself over and over again, where ultimately like you're going to just land on something and test it out.
Look, you bring up a really good point, which is this is not just game and game monetization. This is sports leagues, it's music, it's movies, it's artists, it's celebrities in cooking. Who knows what it's going to be? It doesn't matter. It's all of those things. So really good point. It's not just going to be the games industry that requires it. Bjorn and Saxs, one of the things that came up is, and when we look at Ready Player One, or I put my Oculus on, is the fidelity in the graphics and the realism and the photorealism. And I know there's a question here and brought this. And I would say both Minecraft and Roblox thus far have played a little bit on more the lowest common denominator. And there's a variety of reasons for that from building creator content. People are asking that, when are we going to get the Ready Player One experience? What's the, or have you guys, creators don't want that and consumers don't want that? Or like, what is it around the technical element, the graphic fidelity that we currently see, and what will it take it to get it to that sort of Ready
So I
Player
mean,
One?
you can actually do more advanced stuff in Roblox than most people do today. So there's kind of two parts to it. It's so much easier to make the block stuff, right, than it is to make the more advanced things. And in fact, if you're going to make Fortnite style characters in Roblox, you can. You just have to spend Fortnite levels of money to make the characters. Like there's this level of complexity and creation. From a Roblox point of view, and we've announced this, like we're about to launch a whole new clothing system that, in the past, Roblox, you can think of more like toys. You break apart the 15 components of a character, replace an arm, you replace a leg. But going forward, what we're doing is actually adding layered clothing. So you can put clothing items on top of your character, you can stack them, you can do all kinds of stuff. So we have these things together with physics-based rendering that's coming out as well. And a lot of these innovations that will increase the fidelity. Ironically, though, we are pretty certain that a good chunk of our content will still remain very blocky, very accessible. My 7-year-old daughter is going to continue to play it because she loves it. And we expect that creation of aged up or sort of more advanced visually experiences can happen, but they kind of almost will become almost like an experimental thing that people will be doing. But Roblox, we are very open to incorporating these things. And as you said, there's technical challenge in trying to get these higher fidelity things to seamlessly run on my Samsung S7 phone together with my Xbox and my PC. But so a lot of our engineering is going into bridging those and bringing the fidelity up. So that's happening. It's just interesting to see now what the community does with it.
Yep, totally. Saxs, anything on that before I give us everybody the last
No,
30?
I think graphics is the least interesting part of expression, like for user-generated content, and like when you say lowest common denominator, you make it sound so silly. But that's, I don't know, like as Lego figured out, having more pieces is not what matters.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, yes, it's about a range of expression. Like, what can you make? That's really what matters. And I think Bjorn eloquently said, like, our job as a platform holder is to offer capability and opportunity. And part of that is graphics, obviously. But there's a lot more participation when you can see yourself building that next step, rather than looking at a Fortnite character going, I don't even know where to start. I think that's played to our advantage, and it continues to play to our advantage, that everybody says I can do better than the quote unquote professional developer here.
Got it. Yeah. Yuri, you got 30 seconds to wrap up the metaverse. 30 seconds. Sam, I'm coming to you for a final one too, so be ready.
Creators are the glue that's going to connect the metaverse and be the first pragmatic step to getting it where it needs to be.
Like it. Sam?
Yeah, I think I've sort of said it. I'm wildly excited about the potential. I think we got a long way to go in order to hit at least the definition of it that's interesting to me. But along the way, each of these different things that people are building that are going to be parts of it are pretty fascinating worlds in and of themselves, and business opportunities and creative exploration. So it's going to be fun the whole way.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the point, is there's plenty of opportunity in the miniverses as they exist and as miniverses are being built, and ways to do this with the movement towards ultimately things like federated ID, social graphs being imported, moving beyond worlds, things like that. We will see steps in those directions before we see some sort of, okay, we've launched it. And so I think as long as people are moving in the direction of open-minded, what's good for the end user, you know, this is a shift in the way that we've created content, social, friends, all of these things, and you have to be open-minded to seeing some of these things and looking at solutions. So this was really fun. I hope you guys had a good time. I mean, obviously 45 minutes on the metaverse is kind of ridiculous, kind of meta in itself. But hopefully it gave you, everybody in the audience, some things to think about from players that are actually actively trying to make it happen. And I'll pass it over to Ned to get us ready for the next session.
Thank you, Andy, Sam, Yuri, Bjorn, Saxs. I think this is one of the best panels I've seen on the metaverse. And you guys, I wish it could have kept going, because you guys were really having a great discussion. So appreciate it. And Andy, get back into that metaverse.
Going in.
Good luck.
Thanks, Ned.
All right.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everybody, for the great chat.
Yep. We will be right back, folks, in 14 minutes. We have a keynote conversation with Chris DeWolf, CEO and co-founder of Jam City. So join us at the top of the hour, folks. See you soon.